Part 1. A Man Born into the Delta. Robert Johnson was born into a world that did not record its own history. He came into existence on May 8, 1911 in Hazlehurst, Mississippi, a place defined by cotton fields, segregation, poverty, and silence imposed by force. For Black families in the Mississippi Delta, survival itself was an act of resistance. His birth name was Robert Leroy Johnson, though even that certainty dissolves when confronted with conflicting records. This uncertainty would follow him for the rest of his life, a man half documented, half legend. Robert's childhood was marked by instability. His mother, Julia Major Dodds, moved frequently, fleeing violence, poverty, and the consequences of an affair with a man outside her marriage. Robert grew up without a stable father figure, drifting between homes, towns, and identities. Music entered his life not as ambition, but as presence. The Delta was saturated with sound, work songs, field hollers, spirituals drifting from churches, blues echoing from juke joints at night. Music was not taught, it was absorbed. As a teenager, Robert gravitated toward the guitar. At first, he was not good. This matters. Contemporaries recalled him as awkward, unskilled, even annoying. Sunhouse and Willie Brown, respected Delta bluesmen, remembered Robert as someone who tried to play but failed miserably. His rhythm faltered. His slide technique was crude. His timing was off. When Robert played at gatherings, musicians would sometimes ask him to stop. Humiliation followed him. But unlike many who accepted their limits, Robert disappeared. He left town for months at a time. No one knew where he went. No one knew who taught him. When asked later, stories contradicted each other. Some said he traveled north. Others said he stayed in Mississippi, learning from obscure guitarists who never recorded. What is certain is this: when Robert Johnson returned, he was transformed. His technique had changed completely. His fingers moved with unnatural independence. He played bass lines, rhythm, and melody simultaneously, creating the illusion of multiple musicians. His slide guitar sang like a human voice, mournful, threatening, intimate. The same people who once mocked him now stood silent. This transformation birthed the most enduring myth in blues history. They said Robert Johnson had sold his soul to the devil at a crossroads. The story goes like this. Late at night, at the intersection of two dirt roads, a tall, dark figure took Robert's guitar, tuned it, handed it back, and in exchange claimed his soul. From that moment on, Robert could play anything he wanted. The legend spread not because people were naive, but because they needed an explanation. His skill did not feel earned. It felt acquired. Part 2. Songs from the Edge of Damnation. Robert Johnson lived as if time were already chasing him. He wandered constantly, traveling light, moving between plantations, juke joints, and towns. He had no permanent home. His guitar was his currency. A meal, a bed, a drink, music paid for all of it. His songs reflected this restlessness. Themes of flight, fear, desire, betrayal, damnation, and death dominate his work. Unlike many blues musicians who sang about hardship externally, Robert Johnson turned inward. His lyrics felt confessional, haunted, prophetic. Hellhound on my trail, Crossroad Blues, Me and the Devil Blues. These were not metaphors chosen casually. Robert sang as if something was pursuing him. In 1936 and 1937, Robert Johnson recorded only 29 songs with a few alternate takes. That is the entirety of his recorded legacy. 2 brief sessions, a handful of hours. And yet, those recordings would reshape modern music. His voice was thin but piercing, floating above the guitar like a warning. His lyrics blurred the line between folklore and autobiography. His music carried the weight of ancestral pain and personal dread. Despite his influence today, Robert Johnson was not famous during his lifetime. He played for small crowds. He earned little money. He remained vulnerable, especially as a Black man traveling alone in the Jim Crow South. Jealous husbands, hostile landowners, racial violence. Danger was constant. His death, like his life, is shrouded in uncertainty. In August 1938, Robert Johnson died at the age of 27, likely poisoned, possibly by a jealous husband whose wife Robert had been involved with. Some say it was strychnine mixed into whiskey. Others claim different causes. No autopsy. No official certainty. Just a grave whose location is still debated, and yet his influence did not die with him. Decades later, musicians would rediscover his recordings and recognize something extraordinary. Eric Clapton called him the most important blues musician who ever lived. Keith Richards described hearing 2 guitars, until he realized it was just one man. Robert Johnson became the blueprint. Rock, blues, folk, soul, all of them carry his fingerprints. He was not famous. He was not rich. He did not live long. But he changed music forever. Part 3. Death, the curse of 27, and the birth of a legend. Robert Johnson did not die famous. He did not die celebrated. He did not die understood. He died quietly, violently, and young, exactly the kind of ending that turns a man into a myth. In August of 1938, Robert Johnson was playing music in Greenwood, Mississippi, near a place called Three Forks. By then, he was only 27 years old, though his face already carried the fatigue of a much longer life. He had been drifting through the Delta for years, living off performances, charm, and instinct. According to the most widely accepted account, Robert was poisoned. The story begins, as many blues stories do, with desire. Robert Johnson had a reputation. He was charismatic, sharp-tongued, and dangerously confident. He flirted openly, even recklessly, often with women who were not free to be flirted with. In the rigid, violent social structure of the Jim Crow South, this was not just risky, it was deadly. One night, while playing at a juke joint, Robert was handed a bottle of whiskey. He drank from it. Sunhouse, who later recounted the story, said someone slapped the bottle out of Robert's hand and warned him, "Never drink from a bottle you didn't open yourself." But it was too late. The whiskey, allegedly poisoned with strychnine, had already entered his body. Robert Johnson did not collapse immediately. Instead, he lingered. For days, he suffered convulsions, hallucinations, pain so severe that witnesses said he crawled on the floor, barking and howling as if possessed. Whether this was poetic exaggeration or a literal truth is impossible to know, but the image endured. On August 16, 1938, Robert Johnson died. No doctor's report survives. No autopsy was performed. No official cause of death was recorded. Even his burial is uncertain. There are at least 3 possible grave sites attributed to him. None can be confirmed with absolute certainty. A man who sang about wandering, fleeing, and being hunted disappeared into the earth without a clear marker. And then something strange happened. Instead of fading away, Robert Johnson began to grow, the curse of 27. Robert Johnson would later be recognized as the first figure in what would become known as the 27 Club, a group of influential musicians who died at the age of 27. At the time, no one noticed the pattern. Decades later, when artists like Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, Jim Morrison, Kurt Cobain, and Amy Winehouse would meet the same fate, Robert Johnson's story resurfaced with renewed intensity. The crossroads myth suddenly felt prophetic. Had he known his time was limited? Had he sung about his own death? Songs like Hellhound on My Trail no longer sounded metaphorical. They sounded like warnings, like confessions, like someone aware that something was closing in. But here is the truth that often gets buried beneath the legend. Robert Johnson did not need a curse to explain his death. He lived in a world where black men died young for far less than flirting, wandering, or singing too loudly. Poverty, racism, violence, and exploitation surrounded him constantly. His death was tragic, but it was also painfully ordinary for his time. The myth grew not because reality was insufficient, but because his music felt supernatural, rediscovery, and resurrection. For years after his death, Robert Johnson was largely forgotten. His record sold modestly. His name faded into obscurity. The Delta moved on. New musicians emerged. The blues evolved. Then, in the 1950s and 1960s, something unexpected happened. White musicians in the United States and the United Kingdom began searching backward, looking for the roots of the music they loved. They found old 78 Revolutions per minute records, dusty recordings, ghostly voices, and there was Robert Johnson. His sound did not feel old. It felt eternal. Young musicians were stunned. They could not understand how one man could produce so much sound with a single guitar. They slowed the recordings down, convinced the tracks had been altered. They studied his fingerings. They tried to imitate him. Few succeeded. Eric Clapton would later say that Robert Johnson's music was the most powerful cry that you can find in the human voice. Keith Richards famously thought there were 2 guitarists playing, until someone told him it was just one. The myth was reborn, this time amplified by vinyl radio and global culture. Robert Johnson, the obscure Delta blues man, became the foundation of rock and modern blues. Without him, there is no electric blues. Without him, there is no British blues explosion. Without him, There is no rock as we know it, a man too large for his time. Robert Johnson recorded less than 30 songs ***. That is all. No interviews, no live recordings, no photographs beyond a handful of portraits. Yet, his influence outweighs entire catalogs. This is why the legend persists. Because Robert Johnson does not feel like a musician who belonged to the past. He feels like someone who arrived too early, someone whose art exceeded the technology, culture, and safety of his era. He sang about damnation before rock embraced rebellion. He sang about identity before it was fashionable. He sang about death with the clarity of someone who had already accepted it. Robert Johnson didn't just play the blues, he became it. Part 4, The Crossroads. And what? Symbolism and why this story never died. The Crossroads did not begin with Robert Johnson. That detail matters. Long before his name became attached to the image, the Crossroads already existed as a powerful symbol in African spirituality, in Southern folklore, and in American cultural imagination. It was a place of transition, negotiation, and danger, a place where decisions were made and could not be undone. In West African traditions, the Crossroads is associated with Elegba, Eshu, or Elegba, deities who stand between worlds, open and closed paths, who grant knowledge at a cost. When enslaved Africans were brought to the Americas, these beliefs did not disappear. They transformed, adapted, and survived. In the American South, the Crossroads became a place where fate could be challenged. You went there at night, you went alone, and you came back changed, if you came back at all. By the early 20th century, the idea had merged with Christian imagery. Instead of spirits, the figure waiting at the crossroads became the devil himself. The deal remained the same: talent, power, success, in exchange for something unspeakable. So when Robert Johnson sang about it, people listened. WENTTOTHECROSSROADCs. The song Crossroad Blues was recorded in 1936. On the surface, it tells a simple story. A man stranded at an intersection, unable to get a ride, calling out for help before the sun goes down. But nothing about Robert Johnson's music exists only on the surface. Listen closely. The Crossroads is not just a place, it is a moment, a state of being. The sun going down is not just evening, it is time running out. The fear is not of darkness, but of abandonment. Some listeners heard panic, others heard confession, others heard regret, and many heard a deal being remembered. The ambiguity is crucial. Robert Johnson never explicitly says he sold his soul. He never describes a meeting with the devil in literal terms. What he does instead is far more effective. He allows the listener to complete the story. This is why the myth survives, because it lies between the notes. Talent that demanded explanation. When Robert Johnson returned from his disappearance with astonishing skill, people needed an explanation. In a world where access to training, instruments, and formal education was limited, especially for a poor black man in the Jim Crow South, sudden mastery felt unnatural. Hard work did not feel sufficient as an answer, so the supernatural stepped in. This happens repeatedly throughout history. When society cannot or will not credit discipline, intelligence, and resilience, especially in marginalized individuals, it turns to myth. The Crossroads story is not just about the devil, it is about disbelief. It is about a society unwilling to accept that someone like Robert Johnson could be that good without paying an impossible price. HELLHOUNDSL devils and inner demons. Robert Johnson's lyrics are filled with images of pursuit, hellhounds, falling, being chased, being unable to rest. These are not random metaphors. They are the psychological landscape of a man constantly in motion, hunted not by supernatural forces, but by poverty, addiction, racism, and violence. The devil in his songs often behaves less like a literal being and more like an inescapable presence. Something behind him, something watching, something waiting. In Me and the Devil Blues, he sings as if the devil is a companion, walking side by side, sharing the road. This is not fear. It is familiarity. The devil in Robert Johnson's music is not evil incarnate. It is fate. Why the myth refuses to die. The Crossroads story endures because it answers a question we still ask. What does greatness cost? Robert Johnson's life offers no comfortable conclusion. There is no redemption arc, no late recognition, no safety net. Just brilliance, isolation, and an early grave. The myth fills the emotional gap. It transforms loss into meaning. It transforms suffering into narrative. It transforms silence into explanation. And perhaps most importantly, it protects the music from becoming ordinary. As long as the crossroads exists, Robert Johnson remains untouchable. The crossroads as a mirror. In the end, the crossroads says more about us than it does about him. We want genius to be rare. We want greatness to hurt. We want art to come from sacrifice. So we place Robert Johnson at that intersection, guitar in hand, night air heavy, a figure approaching from the darkness, because it feels right. Not because it is true, but because it is powerful. The myth fills the emotional gap. It transforms loss into meaning. It transforms suffering into narrative. It transforms silence into explanation. And perhaps most importantly, it protects the music from becoming ordinary. As long as the crossroads exists, Robert Johnson remains untouchable. Part 5, Legacy, Myth, and Immortality. Robert Johnson died young, obscure, and almost completely unknown outside the small circuit of the Mississippi Delta. No headlines announced his passing. No crowds gathered. He was buried quietly in a grave that remains uncertain to this day. And yet, few musicians in history have left a shadow as long as his. For more than 2 decades after his death, Johnson existed almost exclusively on fragile shellac records, 78 revolutions per minute discs passed hand to hand among collectors, musicians, and blues enthusiasts. Those who heard them sensed something unsettling and extraordinary. The voice sounded haunted. The guitar sounded impossibly full, as if more than one person were playing. The lyrics hinted at doom, travel, desire, fear, and reckoning. Then, in 1961, everything changed. Columbia Records released King of the Delta Blues Singers, a compilation of Johnson's recordings produced by Frank Driggs. For the first time, Robert Johnson reached a wide audience, and the people listening were young musicians on both sides of the Atlantic, artists who would soon redefine popular music. Eric Clapton would later call Johnson the most important blues musician who ever lived. Bob Dylan said Johnson's lyrics unlocked a new freedom in his own writing. Keith Richards initially believed 2 guitarists were playing on Johnson's records. Robert Plant, Jimmy Page, Johnny Winter, each traced part of their musical DNA back to those recordings. Songs like Sweet Home Chicago, Crossroad Blues, Love in Vain, and Dust My Broom became standards, performed endlessly, reinterpreted across decades, electrified in Chicago, reshaped into rock and roll, and echoed in modern blues. Johnson's influence wasn't just stylistic, it was structural. His use of a walking bass line on guitar, mimicking boogie-woogie piano, changed how the instrument functioned in blues and rock. His ability to make the guitar act as a second voice, answering, interrupting, and conversing with the vocal, became foundational. His lyrics fused folklore, sexuality, religion, and anxiety into poetry that felt both ancient and modern. And then there was the legend, the story of the crossroads, of a man trading his soul for mastery, grew alongside his reputation. Whether born from misunderstanding, metaphor, or later romanticization, the myth endured because it felt true to the music. Johnson's songs were filled with devils, hellhounds, judgment, and wandering. They sounded like someone racing against time. Scholars have debated the origins of the legend, African spiritual symbolism, Southern folklore, exaggeration, or simple metaphor. Others rejected it entirely. But myth or not, the crossroads became inseparable from Robert Johnson's name, turning him into something larger than a musician, a symbol of genius, sacrifice, and the cost of creation. Recognition followed. Johnson was inducted into the Blues Hall of Fame, the Grammy Hall of Fame, and the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as an early influence. His recordings were selected by the National Recording Preservation Board as culturally and historically significant. He became associated with the so-called 27 Club, joining a lineage of artists who burned brightly and briefly. Yet even today, much about Robert Johnson remains unresolved. His childhood details, the truth of his death, the location of his grave. New photographs appear, are debated, accepted, or rejected. Biographies revise earlier assumptions. The story is still being written. Perhaps that is fitting. Robert Johnson was a traveler, a man in motion, someone who slipped between towns, names, and lives. He left behind no letters, no diaries, no interviews. What he left would sound raw, intimate, and eternal. In the end, Robert Johnson didn't need commercial success, long life, or fame to become immortal. 39 songs were enough to shape the blues, enough to ignite rock and roll, enough to ensure that, long after the man disappeared into Mississippi soil, his voice would still be standing at the crossroads, singing Part 6, Blues, the Devil, and the Reinvention of a Myth in Sinners. Before you continue, alert! This part contains spoilers. Decades after his death, Robert Johnson continues to reappear, not only in music, but in the collective imagination. In Sinners 2025, director Ryan Coogler transforms that legacy into cinema, crafting a story that blends horror, black history, blues, and myth. At the center of this narrative is Sammy Moore, a fictional character deeply rooted in the life, music, and legends surrounding Robert Johnson. Set in 1930s Mississippi, Sinners inhabits the same historical world Johnson once walked through: smoky juke joints, traveling musicians, racial violence, rigid religious doctrine, and the constant tension between faith, survival, and artistic freedom. Like Johnson, Sammy is a young blues prodigy raised under the authority of a preacher father who believes the blues to be the devil's music. This conflict, blues as liberation versus blues as sin, is not merely personal. It reflects a real divide within black communities in the American South. For some, the blues represented expression and escape. For others, it symbolized moral decay. Robert Johnson lived directly within this fracture, and Sinners turns that tension into literal horror. In the film, Sammy's music does more than move people emotionally. It summons. His blues conjures spirits, attracts evil, and becomes a gateway between worlds. This narrative choice amplifies the long-standing myth that Johnson's talent was unnatural, inexplicable, even dangerous. The connection deepens through Johnson's own songs. Titles like Meet Me in the Devil Blues, Crossroad Blues, and Hellhound on My Trail are filled with images of pursuit, damnation, guilt, and fate. Sinners gives these themes physical form. Evil is no longer symbolic. It walks, watches, and demands payment. Like Johnson, Sammy carries guilt. In Sinners, his music indirectly leads to the deaths of people close to him, including his love interest, Pearline. This echoes real-world claims made by Johnson's surviving family, who suggested in documentaries such as The Search for Robert Johnson that his choice to play secular blues music resulted in divine punishment, including the death of his wife during childbirth. Yet, Sinners does not simply repeat the myth. It reinterprets it. One of the film's most discussed theories suggests that Sammy, like Johnson in legend, entered into a Faustian bargain. The post-credit scene, in which he appears to be performing for the devil himself, strengthens this reading. Clarksdale, a real location tied to Johnson's Crossroads myth, once again becomes the symbolic place of decision, obedience or freedom, faith or art, safety or self-expression. However, Coogler adds a crucial distinction. Unlike other characters, Sammy rejects literal immortality when offered vampirism. The cost of that choice is immense. He loses his family, his home, and the life he once knew. But he retains his humanity and his agency. In this sense, Sinners suggests that the true bargain is not with the devil, but with one's calling. This interpretation aligns closely with Robert Johnson's real story. There is no evidence of supernatural deals, only of human sacrifice, isolation, poverty, rejection, and an early death. Sammy, by contrast, survives. The film ultimately shows him decades later, in the 1990s, as a successful musician in Chicago, a club owner with recordings and a legacy. It poses a quiet question to the audience. What if Robert Johnson had lived? Ryan Coogler has spoken openly about these parallels. For him, Sammy's story, like Johnson's, represents a Faustian choice faced by those who are dealt an unfair hand by society. The bargain, as Coogler describes it, is not fantasy, but metaphor. What are you willing to give up to escape the limits imposed by faith, poverty, and systemic racism? By merging vampirism, blues, and black history, Sinners does not turn Robert Johnson into a monster. Instead, it translates his myth into contemporary language. Sammy Moore is not Robert Johnson, but he is his echo, his shadow, his unrealized future. In the end, Sinners suggests that Robert Johnson never truly left the crossroads. He simply changed form. Today, he lives in film, in culture, and in every story that asks what talent costs, what freedom demands, and why black genius has so often been forced to pay the highest price. And just as in Johnson's songs, the final question remains unanswered. Was it a pact, or simply the cost of being extraordinary? If you enjoyed this content, please consider leaving a like. It really helps the channel.